Second period English was already a mess before anything happened. We had a substitute because our regular teacher was out sick, and the sub was the type who reads off the lesson plan word for word and does not know any of the usual routines, so everyone was talking more than normal, sliding their phones under their desks and barely looking at the work. I remember looking up at the clock, thinking how slow it was moving when the first vibration hit. Then another. It was not just mine. You could hear it around the room, that little chorus of buzzing from backpacks and pockets. At first, people thought it was just group chats. Then someone near the windows looked down at their screen and said, "Is this real?" They showed the person next to them, and the reaction spread in a wave, faces going from bored to confused to scared in a matter of seconds. I finally checked my own phone. There was a school alert from the district app. It said there was police activity in the area, that the school was in a secure lockdown, that all exterior doors were locked, and that we had to stay in classrooms until further notice. The strange thing was that the sub had not gotten any call yet. The intercom was still silent. A couple of students started talking louder, asking if this was a drill. The substitute looked totally lost, holding the attendance sheet in one hand and her phone in the other, like she had no idea which one she was supposed to be using. Finally, the speakers crackled and the assistant principal came on, sounding way calmer than anyone in the room felt. They said, "Teachers, we are now in a secure lockdown. Please make sure your doors are locked. Continue instruction, but do not let students leave for any reason." That was it. The sub went over and locked the door, but she did not turn off the lights or move us away from the window, because technically this was not a full lockdown. On paper, that is supposed to feel safer. In real life, our brains did not care about the label. Someone in the back had already pulled up a scanner app and was hunched over their phone listening. They said quietly that police were talking about a guy on foot, maybe with something in his hand. No one was working on the worksheet anymore. People were texting friends in other halls, siblings in other schools, parents. The substitute kept repeating that we were safe, that everything was probably fine, but her voice shook enough that it did not really help. Then we heard a helicopter. The low thumping came through the ceiling like an extra heartbeat. It moved slowly over the building, circled, then drifted away and came back again. Someone made a joke about being in a movie, but no one actually laughed. The hallways, which are usually loud even during class, were completely silent. That emptiness became its own kind of noise. After maybe 15 or 20 minutes, things started to fray. A kid in the front said they really had to use the bathroom. The sub told them they could not leave. They argued in whispers. Another student put their head down and quietly started crying. Watching the substitute try to figure out what to do was almost as stressful as the situation itself. She kept looking at the door like she expected someone from the office to show up and tell her what to do next. No one did. Then there was a loud, sharp knock on the classroom door. Not a soft tap, not the way a late student knocks. It was 3 hard hits in a row. Everybody jumped. The sub froze where she was. The kid with the scanner app looked up fast. No one moved. The knock came again, a little faster this time. A voice called out, "Open the door, please." It sounded like an adult, but it was muffled by the door and the walls. The sub walked toward the door slowly, and someone whispered for her not to open it. She hesitated with her hand near the handle and then pulled it back. She asked who it was. There was a pause, and then the voice said, "Office." No name, just that word. Our regular teachers always say their name when they come by during drills, so that tiny detail suddenly mattered a lot. You could see the sub trying to choose between what she thought protocol was and the 30 kids staring at her with wide eyes. Eventually, she stepped back from the door and said she had been told not to open for any reason. There was another pause. Then the footsteps outside moved away, and we heard other doors being tried farther down the hallway. Someone whispered, "What if that was actually the principal?" And someone else answered, "What if it was not?" The helicopter sound faded and came back again. The kid with the scanner app said police were talking about a suspect near a school and checking buildings. Time dragged. My phone battery dropped from refreshing the same 3 apps over and over. The air in the room felt stale. At some point, the assistant principal came on the intercom a second time, and this time their voice had a tired edge to it. They said we were still in secure lockdown, that teachers should not open doors for anyone unless they were verified by the main office or law enforcement, and that staff would come room to room when it was safe. That pretty much confirmed that whoever had knocked earlier was not properly cleared. The sub sat down at the desk after that like her legs were done. No one tried the door again. About an hour later, it finally opened from the outside with a key. A uniformed officer stood there with the principal behind them. They checked our names off a list, told us we did the right thing by not opening the door earlier, and said the lockdown was being lifted slowly. We still were not allowed to roam the halls. We were walked to the next room when it was time, and the rest of the day turned into a blur of shortened classes and half explanations. The official story we got was that there had been a police chase nearby, and the person had ditched their car close to campus. They believed he ran through the woods behind the school, so they locked everything down until they were sure he was not inside. They never actually said he had a weapon, but they did not have to. By then, people had already seen blurry photos online of a person being put into a squad car a few blocks away. For a while after, some students joked that the substitute had been paranoid for not opening the door, but you could tell most of them only joked because the other option was really thinking about what might have happened if she had. I still think about that day sometimes, not because anything dramatic happened in our room, but because of how ordinary it looked when it was all written down. Just a secure lockdown, no injuries, suspect arrested off campus. But sitting there with a stranger in charge, phones lighting up with bits of information, hearing a helicopter overhead, and heavy knocks on the door with no name on the other side, that was more than enough to make the room feel smaller. Now, when people roll their eyes at drills and say the school is overreacting, I remember the sound of that knock and the substitute's hand hovering over the lock, and it does not feel like overreacting at all. It was one of those gray drag-on forever days where the whole school felt half asleep. Last period history, lights humming, everyone pretending to listen while actually counting the seconds until the bell. Our teacher was one of those older ones who still used the projector cart instead of the smartboard, so we were half watching some documentary about the Cold War while people whispered and drew in their notebooks. I was staring at the clock, thinking about what snack I had at home when the intercom clicked on with that little static pop. Normally, the office assistant does this cheerful sing-song voice for announcements, but this time it was the principal, and I knew something was off as soon as I heard the way he breathed. He said, "Teachers, we are going into a lockdown," and then there was this tiny pause before he added, "This is not a drill." His voice was not panicked exactly, but there was a tightness in it that I had never heard before. The room went completely quiet in less than a second. Our teacher, who usually moved like he had all the time in the world, suddenly got up faster than I had ever seen. He shut off the projector, killed the lights, and told us all to get away from the windows and sit on the floor behind the desks on the far side of the room. You could hear chairs scraping, backpacks sliding, a few people laughing nervously before realizing no one else was laughing. The door lock made this loud metallic click that suddenly felt way too small between us and whatever was happening out there. At first, it almost felt routine. We had done lockdown drills before. People whispered dumb jokes during them, texted under their desks, scrolled through apps while the teacher pretended not to notice. But after a minute or two, you could feel the difference. In drills, there is always some kind of announcement that repeats the word drill. This time, there was nothing, just silence and the sound of the air vents. Then somewhere down the hall, something heavy slammed, like a door hitting a wall, and someone let out a small gasp in the dark. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a second I thought about ignoring it. Then I saw it was from a friend in another hallway. They said they heard yelling. Another text came in from someone else saying their teacher was crying. That was when my stomach dropped. Our teacher shuffled closer in the dark and whispered that everyone needed to turn their screens down and keep them covered. Because light shows through the little window on the door, A couple of people had already broken the rules and posted black screens with the word lockdown typed over them. Someone in the back quietly started crying, trying to keep it from being loud. After what felt like 10 minutes, we heard footsteps in the hallway. Not the normal shuffle of a teacher walking, but heavier steps, like boots. They moved past our room, then suddenly stopped. You could hear breathing just outside the door, that hollow kind of sound you only notice when you are trying not to make any of your own. The handle rattled once. It was not loud, just enough to make every single person tense up at the same time. The teacher mouthed, "Do not move at us." The handle rattled again, harder this time, and then there was a dull thud, like a hand or shoulder hitting the door. Somewhere in the room, someone whispered, "Oh my God," and someone else hissed at them to be quiet. The breathing outside the door continued for another few seconds, long enough for my brain to start imagining every possible thing that could be on the other side. Then, the footsteps moved away. No shouting, no banging down lockers, just those steady steps heading farther down the hallway. There were no announcements after that, no sirens, nothing. Just us in the dark, trying to guess how bad it was, based on small sounds and half-finished texts from people in other rooms. One kid kept refreshing the local news on their phone, but nothing was posted. Another person said they heard someone had tried to bring a weapon into school. Another said it was a fight that got out of control. The rumor spread quietly in the corners of the room like a second kind of threat. After a while, the rush of fear started to fade, and it was replaced with this slow, heavy feeling. Your legs go numb from sitting on the floor. Your back hurts from hunching. Your mind goes to strange places. Did I say goodbye this morning? Did I lock my locker? Why did I complain about today being boring? Time got weird. It felt like we were in that room for hours. When the intercom finally clicked again, everybody flinched. The principal spoke again, sounding a little steadier, but still tired. He said the building was secure, and that we were staying in place until further notice. Teachers were told not to release students until they were told directly. Everyone looked at our teacher like that would clear something up, but it did not. We stayed in that room for another half hour before we heard footsteps again, this time with the crackle of a police radio. An officer and our vice principal came to the door, had a quick, quiet talk with our teacher, and then told us the lockdown was being downgraded and we would be dismissed class by class. We were told to leave our stuff and just line up and follow instructions. Walking out into the hallway felt like stepping into a different building. There were officers at the ends of the corridors, a stretcher near the main stairwell with nobody on it, and a dark smear on the tile near the office that someone had tried to mop up too fast. Later, all we got was an email and a short announcement the next day. The principal said an unauthorized person had entered the building through a side door. Someone left propped open and refused to leave when confronted. No details about what they wanted, how long they had been inside, or whether they were armed. The story that spread between students was that it was a former student who had been expelled years before, angry and ranting about teachers who were not even there anymore. Some people said they saw them in handcuffs in the back parking lot. Others said they had tried doors all down the science wing, and ours was one of them. Teachers tried to go back to normal fast, but you could tell they were shaken too. For weeks after, any time a locker slammed too hard or someone yelled jokingly in the hallway, half the class would flinch. The school quietly put in a new buzzer system on the side doors the next month, and that was it. No big assembly, no long talk, just security updates and a quick thank you for your cooperation. Life moved on, but even now, if I am in a classroom and I hear footsteps stop outside the door and the handle jiggle, even if it is just a late kid who picked the wrong room, it is like I am right back on that carpet again, phone lighting up in my hand, waiting to see if the next sound is footsteps walking away or the door opening.